Hi everyone, it's Katrina. I think deep-sea divers are some of the bravest people on the planet. There are so many challenges to diving. There's high pressure, low temperatures, decompression sickness, drowning. Deep water can be suffocating and dark, and you never know just what you're going to find. From a preserved medieval soldier to a lost city full of treasure, let's see what divers have been able to find. Lost medieval soldier. You're not going to believe what was just discovered at the bottom of a lake in Lithuania. Divers uncovered the remains of a man. Not a modern man, though. This guy was a soldier in the Middle Ages. The corpse of this medieval soldier has provided archaeologists with a rare glimpse into the life of a military man who lived about 500 years ago. Not only did divers find his bones, they found a whole heap of his personal effects. It looks as if he fell into the lake with all of his belongings in his pockets and couldn't get out again. What could have happened here? The discovery was made in one of the most scenic parts of Lithuania, a place I highly recommend visiting if you ever get the chance. Lake Asveja is the biggest lake in the whole country. At the center of the lake is a paradise-like island covered in trees and walkways, with WWII castle standing on a low hill. This castle dates back to the 15th century. Curious archaeologists have been searching the dark depths of Lake Asveja since 1998 and have found everything from the remains of sunken ferries to random artifacts. Archaeologists even found the remains of an old bridge that once led from the lake shore to the island and the castle. The medieval soldier was discovered in 2020, his bones buried like fossils underneath the mud at a depth of 29.5 feet. Archaeologist Elena said a floating water pump was used to remove silt and sediment from the remains. It is extremely rare to find human remains underwater that are this old. What could this mystery soldier have been doing to end up in such a watery grave? Anthropologists identified the bones as belonging to a young man, likely in his 20s. Alongside the soldier were artifacts that made it pretty clear what his job was. There was a sword, 2 daggers, sturdy leather boots, and some scraps of what may have been leather armor. This guy was armed to the teeth and dressed like a mercenary. What you're looking at right now is a murder mystery that dates back 5 centuries. Do you suspect foul play? After all, he was found still wearing his sturdy leather boots. Most people don't go swimming with their boots still on. Could he have been pushed by one of his fellow soldiers while garrisoned at the castle? Or was he killed in battle and thrown into the middle of the lake? Let me know if you have any theories in the comments below. Lake offerings. There is an entire civilization hidden underneath the calm surface of Lake Titicaca. The incredible ancient ruins could help to better understand how some of the world's most mysterious sites were created. Sites like Pumapunku and Machu Picchu. The issue is that trying to uncover secrets that have been submerged for centuries is no easy task. The discoveries made in Lake Titicaca are baffling, but they require a little bit of history to properly understand. I'll start by telling you about the lake itself, which is situated along the border of Peru and Bolivia. Lake Titicaca is the largest freshwater lake in South America. It's the highest navigable lake in the world, breathtakingly gorgeous and steeped in legend. The Andean mountains rise in the distance, and not far away is the border of the Amazon jungle. Lake Titicaca was home to the Inca and a very sacred place to the old civilization. In Inca mythology, their creator god emerged from the lake, bringing the human race with him. The myth states that Viracocha appeared from the waters of the lake at the dawn of the universe. He ordered Inti, the sun, and Mamaquilla, the moon, to rise in the sky. Then Viracocha created additional humans from the mud of the earth. He told them to go and populate all the corners of the world. This lake was such a primordial place that the Inca believed that when they died, their spirits would return to the lake. When their spirits passed through the surface of the shimmering water, they would be transported into the afterlife. They had a much more cosmic and mystical view of life and death than many other ancient societies. I've left a few parts out that you likely want to know about. The Inca were not the first people to tell tales of Lake Titicaca. This amazing lake in the mountains has been involved in the development of all the most important cultures of the Andean region, like the Buraka and Tiwanaku. Exactly how many civilizations lived at the edge of this lake is unknown, and surprisingly controversial. In 2000, a team of international archaeologists found an entire temple hidden underneath the lake. The temple predates the Inca by 1,500 years. It was most likely made by the Tiwanaku culture. But hold on a second here. How did they build a temple at the bottom of a lake? There isn't just a temple, there is a whole city. More recent trips by divers to the bottom of the lake have revealed giant terraces that were used for growing crops. I don't know about you, but when I put my crops underwater, they don't typically thrive. Divers have found roads and walls stretching along the bottom of the lake. It's become painfully obvious that Lake Titicaca is harboring a forgotten metropolis. The most logical explanation is that the lake didn't originally have that much water in it. But if it had barely any water, then what's the deal with the Viracocha creation myth? Maybe the lake experienced a brief drought, or maybe the ruins are way older than we thought. There are other mysteries of the lake too, like the Island of the Moon and the House of the Chosen Virgins of the Sun. But these other mysteries are for another day. Be sure to check out more videos from the channel to learn about all the Andean mysteries. And now for a quick break, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big shout-out to Matt Garrett, thanks so much for spending time with us, and Beto Garcia, who is a new subscriber. Be sure to subscribe if you are new here to see more videos about mysterious discoveries. The ruins of Kekova. The sunken ruins of Kekova take us to one of the most gorgeous places in the world that you can see for yourself in person if you don't mind getting on a plane and traveling to paradise. Just off the Mediterranean coastline of Turkey is the island of Kekova, a massive region that includes smaller mini islands and gorgeous seaside resorts. The sea here is literally turquoise, so pure and blue you'll wonder what's wrong with every other body of water you've ever seen in your life. But Kekova isn't just a relaxing place to bask in the sun and enjoy stunning natural beauty, it's also a land of history and secrets. On the northern side of Kekova is the underwater city of Dolciste. It's an ancient settlement that was founded by the Lycians, then destroyed by something that they had no control over. In the early part of the 20th century, Italy went to war with the Turks to try and claim the island for themselves. But they lost, and so the island remains in the hands of the Turks. The first known people to occupy the island were the Lycians, who built Dolciste. You may have heard the name before, but you might not know precisely who the Lycians were. The most accurate description is that they were a diverse group of people who lived across Lycia. Lycia was a historical region in Turkey's Anatolia, thriving from about 1500 to 550 BC. Lycians loved islands, or maybe it was just that they happened to live on the Mediterranean coast near islands. History has shown, and I'm sure you'll agree, that when people have the option, they gravitate toward islands. I mean, wouldn't you? It was this love for island life that had the Lycians building epic cities in places like Kekova. The city of Dolciste thrived up until the sea decided to claim it. Around the 2nd century AD, an earthquake rocked the region, and Dolciste slipped into the sea. The city was partly rebuilt higher up. Then, when the Arab invasion of the 7th century reached Anatolia, the city was abandoned. These days, Dolciste is only accessible by taking a boat tour. Swimming is forbidden, but you don't need to swim or dive to enjoy the ruins. You can see them like you can see your own foot in the bathtub because the water is so clear. The Doomsday Fish. A fish has been spotted by divers that could herald disaster. People are freaking out, panic has erupted in the streets, and folks are cashing in their stocks. The Doomsday Fish has been sighted. It's not really as dramatic as all that, but people are indeed worried. While diving off the coast of Taiwan, divers came across a Pacific oarfish, also known as a ribbonfish, or a king of herrings. The fish is said to be a very bad omen. You might remember the terrible disaster of Japan's 2011 earthquake, which killed an estimated 20,000 people and caused unspeakable damage. In the weeks before the earthquake, around 20 Pacific oarfish washed ashore. They were trying to warn us of the impending apocalypse. 2011 was one of the worst natural disasters of the 21st century. The legend is that if you see an oarfish, something bad is going to happen. It's like seeing a black cat, smashing a mirror, walking under a ladder, and saying Beetlejuice 3 times, all in the same afternoon. The myth has been around for centuries, entwined with ancient Japanese folklore and the folklore of other Pacific Coast cultures. The thing about oarfish is that they typically live in the Twilight Zone. No, not the Twilight Zone as in where freaky stuff happens and paranormal shenanigans occur. The Twilight Zone as in the darkness 3,000 feet beneath the surface of the ocean. It's extremely rare for humans to come across oarfish. You're more likely to stumble upon a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. The only time people see these fish is when they rise to the surface or wash up on beaches, which tends to happen right before disasters. Did you know the oarfish is the biggest bony fish on Earth and the closest thing to a living sea dragon? Well, it is. I promise, I'm telling the truth. Oarfish can grow up to 36 feet long and weigh 440 pounds. They are protected by a silvery coating of what kind of looks like slime called guanine. They don't have scales, but still somehow manage to shimmer. Could these majestic sea creatures really be warnings of inescapable disaster? Some scientists think oarfish rise to the surface because they detect changes in the Twilight Zone. They get spooked and climb to shallow waters where they wash up on the beach. Other scientists think it's nonsense. Diving instructor Wang Chengru said oarfish climb to shallow waters when they're dying. Wang was the one who witnessed the Doomsday Fish in February 2024. Disaster hasn't struck yet, but it could soon. The Mystery Shipwreck. What a random swimmer just found off the coast of Israel is going to make you very jealous. According to the Israel Antiquities Authority, the swimmer was doing some leisurely backstrokes when they spotted a series of ancient columns. He was off the coast of Nantanya in the Mediterranean Sea. His name is Gideon Harris, and he may have accidentally discovered shipwrecked treasure. Every time you go to the beach, do you ever wonder, why isn't it me who discovers shipwrecked treasure? Maybe one day, though. Maybe one day. If you've ever found treasure, be sure to let me know in the comments. Gideon's treasure was not gold coins or chests full of glittering rubies. Instead, his treasure came in the form of marble. The huge marble columns he discovered had fallen off a Roman ship when it sank 1,800 years ago. When most divers or swimmers find treasure, they can stick it in their pockets. Not this time. The columns were over 20 feet long and would have needed a crane to heave out of the water. Archaeologists think they were destined for a building project. The columns were likely going to be used to construct a palace, theater, a temple, pretty much anything you can imagine. As for where the columns came from, they likely originated from a quarry in Turkey or Greece. Then they were loaded on a merchant vessel, a ship that could have carried 200 tons of cargo. That ship left, bound for a Roman city, but they must have hit a storm and sank in shallow water. The destroyer's bell. How would you like to hang a giant brass bell that weighs a whopping 80 pounds somewhere in your house? It would certainly get everyone's attention when dinner's ready. One such bell was recently uncovered in the wreckage of an American ship, a ship that was blasted to pieces by a pack of submarines in World War I. You might not know that submarines are like wolves and travel in packs, but it's true. In 1917, the destroyer USS Jacob Jones was torpedoed near Great Britain. It was by itself conducting gunnery training when a pack of German U-boats appeared from the depths like a pack of wolves emerging from the shadowed forest. Within minutes, the torpedo strikes caused the ship to flood. As it sank into the icy waters of the Atlantic Ocean, its crew was left scrambling onto the 3 available lifeboats. Unfortunately, there were not enough lifeboats to save everyone. Officers set sail with the 3 lifeboats full, seeking the English coast. They returned the next day for the men who had been left stranded in the frigid water. Although the rescue was quick, many people froze. Out of the 7 officers and 103 men on board the ship, only 46 lived to tell the tale. The whereabouts of the USS Jacob Jones were unknown until 2022. The boat was found 6 miles off the coast of the Isles of Scilly, not to be confused with Sicily in Italy. A search team dove down to the vessel and were able to bring up its humongous brass bell. If you know a thing or two about US Navy policy, you may have noticed something amiss here. It is official policy not to disturb the wreckage of an American shipwreck. The USS Jacob Jones is considered a hallowed war grave. The only reason the war grave was disturbed was that the US Navy determined the ship's bell would probably be illegally salvaged. It was better that they be the ones to bring it to the surface. The Earthiest Ship Gun. What do you think is the oldest gun that's ever been salvaged from the bottom of the sea? Would you guess 200 years, 500 years, 1,000 years? The oldest gun ever found by a scuba diver was uncovered off the western coast of Sweden 20 years ago. When it was found, nobody really knew what it was. The mysterious artifact looked like a metal funnel. It looked like a rusty piece of kitchen equipment. Now, researchers know it was a shipboard gun, perhaps used on a medieval pirate vessel. Even people who consider themselves firearm experts might not be familiar with the guns used on medieval ships. This thing was a cannon, a funnel-shaped cast copper cannon affixed to the side of a ship to blast other ships. I'm sure you're familiar with cannons that were used by pirates. We've all seen them causing explosions of splinters in movies and TV. This gun was the smaller, more primitive version. These small early cannons were popular on ships in the 15th and 16th centuries. However, scientists at the University of Gothenburg dated this particular piece of weaponry to the 14th century. It's one of the earliest guns that has ever been found in the world, sunk off the coast of Marstrand. Marstrand was an important port in the 14th century. A lot of trading happened here, with commercial goods being shipped between the Baltics and Western Europe. But with great coin comes great piracy, and the area was constantly absorbed in one conflict or another. Merchant vessels funded an early arms race by stocking up on the newest and most devastating guns. World War I destroyers. 3 incredible wrecks have been discovered off the coast of Scotland's Orkney Islands. 2 of them are destroyers that fought in World War I. The other is a merchant ship that sank by accident when it got rammed by a friendly warship. In December 1916, the HMS Hosta and a boat whose name is so inappropriate I think I might have to bleep it, sank within hours of one another. They collided while returning to the British Royal Navy's fleet base in Scapa Flow. What kind of egregious error led to a pair of destroyers colliding? This seems like a bad mistake on behalf of both captains. The truth is that the HMS Hosta was suffering from steering problems. It was ordered to return to its base and to be escorted by the other ship. The escort was a bad move because the Hosta couldn't maneuver properly. A steering gear defect caused the Hosta to steer directly toward the other boat, which couldn't move in time. The collision wouldn't have been that bad if not for one big whoopsie. I call it a whoopsie, but it was really a horrible tragedy that resulted in the deaths of 55 people. When the 2 ships hit, it set off depth charges. One ship lost 51 officers and men, while the Hosta lost 4 sailors. 2 years later, the small merchant steamer SS Express suffered a similar fate. It was struck by the destroyer HMS Grenville on a dark and windy night in February 1918. Every soul on board was whisked away to the afterlife. Now, the 2 destroyers and the merchant ship have been found by divers, plus a 4th wreck yet to be identified. The wrecks are sitting at a depth of around 330 feet. The divers weren't able to recover much, but just finding and identifying the wrecks is pretty impressive. The divers, who are part of the Lost in Waters Deep search team, didn't just find haunting shipwrecks. They also found the eternal resting place of brave soldiers who fought in the Great War. The soldiers may be gone, but their descendants will now know where their bones lie. Ancient coins. An epic coin collection like you won't believe was recently found by divers in Italy. The collection is enough to make coin enthusiasts dizzy with envy. The coinage is from the 4th century AD. Before the fall of Rome, divers found tens of thousands of them. When it comes to Roman coin hoards, usually there are only a few. The coins are often found in jars or pots, maybe a couple dozen or maximum a few hundred of them. Not this new cache of treasure. It is unprecedented because of how many coins are in it. Enough to fill your pockets, your friends' pockets, and the whole trunk of your car. It all started with a diver who spotted something shiny off the coast of Sardinia. I can't tell you exactly where the discovery was made because officials have kept it a secret. Just imagine the chaos that would unfold if they announced a deposit of ancient coins waiting to be pilfered by the masses. It would be anarchy in the water. Divers would be ripping each other's masks off trying to get to the treasure. After the divers saw the mysterious shiny object, they reached out to authorities. Authorities sent archaeologists to check it out, and the archaeologists were floored. Underneath the waves, underwater archaeologists used metal detectors to collect somewhere around 50,000 coins. Assuming you could sell each coin for $1, that's a cool profit of $50,000. Although I think most people would pay more than $1 for an ancient Roman coin. It's more likely the treasure is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Look at the condition they're in. These things are worth a fortune, more than I can possibly guess. Most Roman coins are badly damaged. You can buy Roman coins online for a few dollars, but they're worn out and indecipherable. They look like pennies that have been pulled out of the sewer. Out of the 50,000 coins salvaged from Sardinia, Italy's culture ministry said only 4 of them are damaged. The rest are perfectly preserved as if they were minted yesterday. This shocking state of preservation makes each individual coin wildly rare. Plus, many of them depict Roman Emperor Constantine I, aka Constantine the Great. When a ruler has the Great at the end of their name, that's how you know they're important. Alexander the Great, Catherine the Great, Charlemagne the Great, Cyrus the Great. I could go on and on. Constantine ruled from 306 to 337 AD. His exploits have made him one of the most collectible figures of the Roman Empire. Perfectly preserved coins with his face on them are wildly rare and worth a fortune by themselves. There could be more coins nearby. Archaeologists think the coin hoard is part of a shipwreck, though the actual wreckage is nowhere to be seen. It's possible that within the next few months, I could be reporting on one of the biggest treasure ships ever found. Skeleton panda sea squirts. Divers have discovered an incredible new species of panda that you're going to immediately fall in love with. This is one of the stranger discoveries of a new species because it was already known for years before being technically discovered. Divers who visit the Japanese island of Kumejima are used to seeing the undersea pandas, but scientists had never paid them any attention. Not until now. Japan's newest species of animal is part cute and part creepy and totally squishy. It's called the skeleton panda sea squirt, or a name that's really long in Japanese. The little creatures are 0.78 inches or 2 centimeters. They look both skeletal and panda-like. I mean, look at these guys. They have what appears to be a skeleton inside their squishy outer layer, but their faces are white and black like pandas. Wouldn't you love having these things in your aquarium? Like I said before, divers have known about them for a long time. Recently though, researchers from the University of Hokkaido gave them an official Latin name, Clavellina ossipande, and declared them a unique species. Luftwaffe aircraft. In World War II, the German Luftwaffe was an entity of pure destruction. Now, one piece of that diabolical war machine has been discovered at the bottom of Faliero Bay near Athens. The German aircraft is in terrible shape, which you would expect from any plane at the bottom of the ocean since the 1940s. A group of divers from the Addicted to H2O technical team were behind the discovery. They used sonar to scan the seabed where some fishermen told them something suspicious was lurking. With oxygen tanks strapped to their backs and closed-circuit rebreathers, 2 divers explored the wreckage for 35 minutes. You have to marvel at how great these guys are at their job. Even in total darkness and covered in more equipment than an astronaut, divers identified the tail fuselage, a fuel canister, and other pieces of the wreck stuck in a damaged trawl net. Most normal people wouldn't be able to see their fingers in front of their face in such dark waters. The plane was identified as a Junkers Ju-52. You military buffs are going to recognize it as one of the most mass-produced aerial vehicles of the war, known to the Allies as Iron Annie. The plane was used heavily during the battles of Crete and Leros in 1941 and 1943. During the German occupation of Greece, the Luftwaffe had their base near Faliero Bay. There were hundreds of these planes that disappeared during the war, many of them with their pilots still strapped in their seats. While not confirmed, divers think that this plane could be production number 7098. It was recorded as having crashed on November 28, 1943. The Challenger. At the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle, divers found a piece of spacefaring history. A fragment from a real spaceship was uncovered at the bottom of the world's most mysterious triangle. Yet how it got there isn't mysterious at all. In fact, the whole thing is a little sad. While filming a show for the History Channel off the coast of Florida, divers found debris from the Challenger space shuttle that exploded almost 40 years ago. The debris was thrown across the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and was initially mistaken for pieces of a shipwreck. The divers had been looking for the wreckage of the PBM Martin Mariner rescue plane, which vanished in the Bermuda Triangle without a trace in 1945. While looking, they noticed a section of the seafloor covered in weird pieces of tile. It almost looked like someone's bathroom floor. The tiles were more modern than any kind of debris from a World War II-era vehicle. The dive team documented what they found and reached out to NASA. The space agency got back to them as fast as lightning. Yes, they confirmed the debris is from the Challenger disaster. It was the first time in 25 years that a piece of the Challenger was found. As exciting as the discovery was, it brought back some terrible memories. For those of you who were watching live on January 28, 1986, it might still feel like yesterday. Millions of people around the globe sat down in front of their colored TVs to watch the Challenger blast off into space. Not just people at home, but kids in their classrooms across the country tuned in as well. This was one of the biggest events of the 1980s broadcast live on TV. 73 seconds after the shuttle launch, it exploded and all of the astronauts were killed. Some of the debris ended up in the Bermuda Triangle. The little pieces of tile found by the divers were, according to Smithsonian curator Jennifer Levasseur, a sort of armor to protect the vehicle on re-entry. Catching reindeer. Would you ever consider eating a reindeer? Maybe you've tried deer, moose, or perhaps even a kangaroo, depending on where you live. But what about a reindeer, one of Santa's trusty helpers? If you lived 11,000 years ago, the answer would be a resounding, absolutely, give me more reindeer. A structure was recently discovered off the coast of Germany that was used for trapping reindeer by Stone Age people. So apparently you don't say cave people anymore. Cave people isn't really the appropriate term. Anthropologists prefer hunter-gatherers. The structure that was found is about a mile long, built by nomadic humans as a way to trap and slay whole herds of reindeer. The stone wall is about 3 feet high, straight and broken in some places. The really impressive thing is that it's 69 feet underwater. Can that really be how much the sea level has risen since the Ice Age? The incredible feature was found by chance in 2021. Students at Kiel University were doing a training exercise by mapping the sea floor. 6 miles off the coast of Rerik, their scans revealed the humongous wall. They were so impressed that the team used an autonomous underwater vehicle to dive down and study the site. Lead author of the study, geophysicist Dr. Jacob Gearson, said the methodical arrangement of the stones proves the wall was made by humans. It took over 1,670 stones to make, with some stones weighing 220 pounds. Because it's underwater, the wall must have been built between 14,000 and 8,500 years ago, when this section of the Baltic Sea was dry as a bone. Prior to 14,000 years ago, the whole place was covered in ice. First came the ice, then the dryness, and then the water as the world slowly flooded. Have you heard of the Congomose culture? If not, don't feel bad. After all, the culture hasn't been around in 10,000 years. They lived in Scandinavia, where they hunted reindeer and lived in nomadic encampments. This particular wall was used by the Congomose to guide stampeding reindeer into a bottleneck at the edge of a prehistoric lake. The reindeer got jammed against the stone wall and the lake, making it easier for hunters to kill dozens of reindeer at once. Savage but effective, and surprisingly sophisticated for its time. Scientists say that no other prehistoric structure like it has ever been found in Europe. The Bermuda War Plane. The wreckage of a warplane that's been lost for over 6 decades has a story behind it that you don't want to miss. The plane was lost beneath the depths of the Atlantic Ocean near the Bermuda Triangle on a routine training mission gone horribly wrong. Before I get into the incredible details of the disaster, let me introduce you to Michael Barnett and Jimmy Gadomski. They work with the Association of Underwater Explorers, spending a lot of their time searching for lost relics beneath the seas. Michael and Jimmy had received a tip-off from a local fisherman about an unidentified military aircraft off Miami Beach. The duo went to the area the fisherman told them about, and sure enough, Resting off Key Biscayne was the wreckage of a Marine Corps attack plane that sank in 1957. The incident occurred in January of that year. First Lieutenant Richard Lee McCombs was behind the controls of his Douglas AD-5 Skyraider. He was participating in a simple exercise when his plane suddenly experienced a catastrophic loss of oil pressure. Luckily, Richard was familiar with the airplane and knew the proper procedure. He took it into open water, avoiding the beach and what could have been a bloodbath. Richard made it out alive. He was rescued by a helicopter as his plane sank into the Atlantic. A month after the crash, the Marines recovered the plane's engine. Then the Coast Guard dragged the plane deeper out to sea and left it there. Richard would have been very excited by the discovery, but sadly he passed away in July of 2022. He was 25 years old when he crashed and 90 when he died. Still, Michael and Jimmy tracked down Richard's children to share the exciting news with them. Amy McCombs, Richard's daughter, said she was in shock when she learned of the discovery, and so soon after her father's passing.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Fossil Graveyard. Madagascar is well known for its extremely unique wildlife, and if you go back thousands of years, its plants and wildlife were even more peculiar. Australian diver Ryan Dart decided to go for a swim in a cave. He said in the worst case scenario it would be a great surf spot, but what he found instead was a lost world. Strange forests, lemurs the size of gorillas, pygmy hippos, horned crocodiles, and elephant birds all lying there in a large underwater graveyard. He let other colleagues and scientists know, and a few years later, with funding from National Geographic, the National Science Foundation, and Madagascar, an international team of researchers and divers went in to explore. Located in a series of 3 submerged caves beneath Tsim Anam Petsotsa National Park, they contain diverse hordes of fossilized, ancient, and extinct animal bones, all in pristine condition. Just imagine the bones lying there on the surface and they get trampled by big animals or run over by trucks and crushed. These bones aren't damaged in any way, primate paleontologist Alfred Rosenberger told CNN. Included among the fossilized specimens were 2 fossa, a type of cat-like carnivore who probably used the cave as a lair. Many of the extinct creatures died out surprisingly recently, with fossils of introduced animals like rats and Indian civets pointing toward the likelihood that many lost endemic species coexisted with humans in their final days, and also serving as a troubling reminder of our destructive impact on wildlife. Many of these animals disappeared around 2,500 to 500 years ago. The question is how all these animals ended up in Aven Cave. Nat Geo reports the divers have only just begun to catalog what's on the surface, much less understand how this bed of bones was created. Who knows what else is under there? Pretty cool, huh? A strip club. Marine biologist Gil Koplovitz found himself reporting a rather unusual discovery in 2013 when he shared his discovery of an abandoned underwater strip club. Not quite a new species of shark, for example, but definitely not something you're expecting underwater while diving, right? Koplovitz was diving off the coast of Israel and was in the ocean near a long dock when he came across huge rusted windows. As he peered through the glass, he realized that everything was remarkably clean. All tables and chairs had been removed, but there was one thing that he recognized: a stripper pole. Turns out it used to be called the Nymphus Show Bar off the coast of Eilat, Israel. The strange structure started out as an ordinary restaurant, Koplovitz said in an email to the Huffington Post, before becoming a subaquatic erotic venue. He explained the entrance to the strip club is above water. People just crossed a 230-foot bridge and went down a flight of stairs. No need to get wet. The windows look out into the ocean at rocks and coral reefs. Fish got a free show. Despite researching the establishment, Koplovitz is admittedly unsure of when or why it closed its doors for good. Its website was taken down, and its ultimate fate remains a mystery. Massive mystery knife. Speaking of mystery, several years ago, an image of 3 divers posing with what appears to be a massive knife began making rounds on social media platforms, including Reddit and Facebook. The gigantic object seems to dwarf the individuals holding it, who you'd think would pair the photograph with a story about how and where they found it, and its suspected origins. If I found a huge knife in the ocean, I would tell you about it. But the photograph circulated the internet without any explanation or anyone laying claim to the find. The lack of details regarding what most people would consider an incredible discovery led many social social media users to speculate that the image is a hoax, and this theory certainly seems the most likely, especially since someone probably would have come forward and taken credit for it by now if it were real. Surprisingly, nobody seems to have falsely claimed that they were in the photograph or that they know anything about it. But as long as it remains online, the possibility of a fame-hungry imposter trying to take ownership of a role in this is possible. It's also possible, however unlikely, that the true story behind the photo, whether it's real or fake, will come to the surface. What do you think? Do the gigantic knife and the people holding it seem real to you? Or is it safe to write this one off as a cleverly doctored image? Let me know in the comments below. It's shout-out time! Big thank you to Natasha Coles and Tom Tinker's Res Life for their nice comments. Love you guys! If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join us. Classic cars. If you owned or had access to an expensive car, the last thing you'd probably do is dump it into a river. Unless you were a getaway driver, that is. Acting on a tip from a self-proclaimed former getaway driver earlier this year, divers from Adventures with Purpose, a YouTube channel dedicated to retrieving valuable submerged cars, found 9 vehicles near a boat launch at the bottom of the Tualatin River outside Portland, Oregon, including a 1973 Ford Mustang and a first-generation Mazda RX-7. While most of the vehicles were beyond saving, the Mustang and the RX-7 were salvageable. The divers called a tow truck, and the cars were dragged to land from their watery graves. Retrieving them wasn't easy. The Mazda was upside down, requiring workers to flip it over before the tow truck pulled it out. And while its wheels and interior bits were all present, its roof was pushed in, its paint was peeling, and its rescuers were unable to pop the hood. Removing the Mustang from the river was even more difficult because it was stranded even further into the river. The engine ripped from the chassis while the team attempted to lift the front end using inflatable balloons, and they had to summon a heavy-duty rig to yank it out of the muddy river bottom. The car was completely rusted out and folded beyond recognition as it was being removed. The intended fate of the cars remains unknown for now, though it unfortunately sounds like the Mustang is as good as gone. Ancient shipwrecks. In June 2019, divers near the small Greek island of Levitha discovered the remains of 5 ancient shipwrecks, all around 2,000 years old, along with an 880-pound giant granite anchor sitting 150 feet beneath the water's surface. Ancient sailors in the Aegean Sea lived a risky life, and losing everything was an everyday possibility. The 5 ships found underwater were loaded with goods. Most of them had large amphorae, ancient two-handled jugs with narrow necks and slender handles, which held valuable liquids like oil and wine. These containers, which date to the middle of the 3rd century BC, came from many nearby cities, representing a healthy amount of trade 2,000 years ago. Other artifacts at the site, including the granite anchor pole, date as far back as the 6th century BC. In addition to the 5 shipwrecks, divers also found 3 other nearby sunken vessels, dating back between the 2nd century BC and the 2nd century AD. This expedition included 57 group dives and 92 hours of work on the sea floor. Researchers plan to further explore the area around Levitha and several other nearby Aegean islands in hopes of learning more about ancient trading routes and activities. Noxious underwater spring. Earlier this year, divers off the coast of the Philippines discovered an underwater spring 200 feet beneath the water's surface that is spewing carbon dioxide like champagne bubbles. When it comes to unwanted emissions, humans are usually to blame, but in this case the cause is geological. More specifically, a nearby volcano venting through cracks in the ocean floor is responsible for the spring, which not only acquires its fizz naturally, it's paradoxically located near a coral reef system that's alive and well. These high CO2 environments that are actually close to thriving reefs. How does it work? Wondered geoscientist Bayani Cardenas. His concern is valid, considering how often carbon dioxide is associated with destruction and loss of life. Life is still thriving here, but perhaps not the kind that we are used to, he continued. The mysterious site is situated between the islands of Luzon and Mindoro in a stretch of water called the Verde Island Passage. Cardenas and his team discovered soda springs unintentionally while attempting to study the effects of groundwater from nearby islands on local ecosystems. Its higher than average concentrations of carbon dioxide make the site an ideal place for studying the ongoing mystery of how marine life adapts to increased levels of CO2. Long Island Shipwreck. Late in the Civil War, the Confederate commerce raider vessel CSS Tallahassee encountered the Adriatic off the Montauk, Long Island coast, turning it from a ship into a shipwreck. Earlier this year, divers rediscovered the remains of the 181-foot-long Adriatic 30 miles south of Montauk Point, 156 years after it sank to the bottom of the Atlantic. Finding the wreck was especially significant for Long Islanders, as it highlights how close the Civil War came to home in the form of Confederate raiders, according to former Nassau County Museum supervisor and author Harrison Hunt. While several local ships were captured during the war, I don't know of any taken as close to Long Island as Adriatic. To make up for its limited industrial resources and pressure to assemble a navy, the Confederacy refitted steam and sail-powered vessels with cannons and sent them after Union ships. The encounter between Tallahassee and Adriatic occurred on August 12, 1864, and was the final Confederate incursion into northern waters before the war ended. The Tallahassee's crew removed nearly 200 passengers from Adriatic and burned it, sinking it 220 feet beneath the water's surface. Commercial fishers subsequently discovered the wreck, which served as an inconvenient obstacle to their catch, and alerted Long Islander John Noonan to its presence. In 2016, Noonan gathered a team and began a series of dives to recover what was left of the Adriatic after verifying its checkered past through historical record. Ancient Egyptian Temple. In mid-2019, Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities announced the discovery of a trove of artifacts, including gold jewelry, coins, the missing piece of a 43-foot-long, 16-foot-wide ceremonial boat, and the remains of a temple among the underwater ruins of the ancient city of Heraklion. Named after Hercules, whom locals actually believe visited at some point, the once thriving metropolis was built around the 8th century BC. It was situated along the Nile River near the Mediterranean Sea, and Cleopatra was even crowned in one of its temples before its ultimate demise around 1500 years ago when the city flooded. Today, Heraklion sits beneath 150 feet of water. Archaeologists first discovered the city's ruins in 2000. In their most recent 2-month excavation, they found the aforementioned remains of a large temple, including its stone columns, along with a smaller Greek temple buried 3 feet beneath the seabed, and the previously described ceremonial ship, which contained jewelry as well as bronze and gold coins dating back to the reign of Ptolemy II, who ruled from 283 to 246 BC. These are just some of the latest finds in a series of ongoing investigations into Heraklion's ruins. A sword in a stone. Last October, divers from RKBUK, a boating and diving club in Banja Luka, Bosnia, uncovered a medieval sword at the bottom of the 150-mile-long Vrbas River, 36 feet below the water's surface. This sword had sat stuck in a stone for around 7 centuries before the divers found it in relatively good condition, considering the amount of time it was submerged. An analysis of the blade confirmed that it originated sometime between the end of the 13th century and the first half of the 15th century, according to historian Janko Vrakar of the Republika Srpska Museum. The weapon was a rare discovery, prompting local and regional authorities to prioritize its preservation. As archaeologists removed the sword, the stone it was embedded in began to crack. They retrieved a rock sample for testing. Exactly how and why the sword wound up piercing a stone and sinking to the bottom of the river remains unknown, but the discovery came with some much-deserved local pride. The mayor tweeted, "Our sword in stone, taken out of Vrbas after who knows how many centuries." Figuratively speaking, researchers are still trying to get to the bottom of the sword's history. Huge World War II explosive. In late 2019, the largest unexploded bomb ever discovered in Poland was spotted in one of its busiest shipping channels. Designed by the British for attacking underground targets, the seismic 6-ton explosive is known as a tall boy. It was found in the Piast Channel by workers from a German company who were tasked with deepening the water body. It's one of the largest such weapons that was used during World War II and mimicked the effects of an earthquake. The workers reported the discovery, and Polish Navy divers were dispatched to the site, where they investigated the object in question and realized it was unexploded. The tall boy and others like it were deployed on April 6, 1945, during a raid on the Lutzow, a German cruiser that was anchored in the channel. While this wasn't the biggest British explosive to be discovered in the region, it's certainly among the largest. The 12,000-pound bomb still sits at the bottom of the channel, where it's been for the past 75 years, and because it seems to be a non-hazard to shipping traffic, the waterway remains open despite its presence. A crisis team has met to discuss what to do with the tall boy, but no action has been taken yet, and the team's plans are unknown. Train wreck. Dive shop owner Steve Broadbelt was shocked when he discovered 13 partially buried train wheel and axle sets in the shallow waters off the village of East End on Grand Cayman, the largest of the Cayman Islands. Broadbelt and a colleague found the coral-encrusted parts about 20 feet beneath the surface using dive scooters while performing routine maintenance on some underwater cameras belonging to his store. The wreck, which had never been reported before then, piqued the interest of the Cayman Islands National Museum, which opened opened an investigation into the discovery. The wreck falls under the protection of a law meant to preserve abandoned wrecks, according to museum director and underwater archaeology expert Peggy Leshikar-Denton, who theorized that the parts were intended for phosphate mining during the late 19th century. Caribbean historian Christopher Williams suggested that the artifacts were possibly cargo that fell off a Jamaica-bound vessel that ended up in Cayman waters due to navigational error, and ultimately wrecked. Captain Kidd's treasure. Captain Kidd once hunted pirates for a living, but turned to the dark side in the late 1600s, attacking merchant vessels in the Caribbean and reaching as far as Madagascar. He had a fearsome reputation and terrorized the seas until he was finally captured and sentenced to death in 1701. There were a number of accounts of the treasure he collected during his piracy and stories of where he hid it. In 2015, researchers announced the discovery of what they believed to be some of his treasure in a sunken ship off the coast of Madagascar. In what's thought to be the wreck of his ship, the Adventure Galley, divers found a 107-pound silver bar. The bar itself has been traced to 17th century Bolivia, and the ship has all the hallmarks of one built in England. If, as researchers suspect, this truly is the remains of his ship, there could be much more treasure waiting to be uncovered. He was known to have raided a number of ships that were loaded with gold and silver, much of which has never been retrieved. The Pulaski. In 2018, the company Blue Water Ventures, along with Endurance Exploration Group, were finally able to recover the remains of the steamship Pulaski off the shores of North Carolina. The Pulaski went underwater on June 14, 1838, when one of the boilers of the ship exploded. The ship was traveling from Savannah, Georgia to Baltimore, Maryland, and over half of the passengers died. The ship went down extremely quickly, taking many lives and artifacts down with it. The dive team reported finding a chest full of rare gold and silver coins, along with many other treasures and relics from the past. One of the most exciting finds were several very expensive pocket watches, made out of gold with ornate etchings on them. At auction, they are expected to receive around $15,000. When the ship went down, it was estimated that passenger losses were around $150,000, so the team says that they have barely scratched the surface of valuable things waiting to be discovered. $150,000 from 1838 is over $4 million in today's money. There were quite a few wealthy passengers on that ship. Blue Water Ventures International says that the wreck of the Pulaski is a giant puzzle, and they are working to put the pieces back together and recover valuable archaeological cargo and artifacts. SS Central America. The SS Central America sank off the coast of Carolina in 1857 when it ran smack into a hurricane. While that may sound common, the cargo was not. It was full of tons and tons of gold. 130 years later, in 1987, researchers had the technology to map and explore the sea floor, and that meant that finding shipwrecks got a whole lot easier. A research scientist named Thomas G. Thompson got tons of investors to help him finance his dive and search for the treasure. You'll want to remember his name, but not for the reasons you might think. His robot vehicle Nemo brought up more than $40 million in gold. But it turns out that American and British companies had already insured the ship's cargo over 100 years earlier, so they all decided to divide the treasure with almost all of it going to the companies. Later on, Thompson's investors slapped him with another lawsuit, claiming that he had never given them their share. The treasure hunter missed a court hearing and became a fugitive. While all of this was going on, Odyssey Marine Exploration was hired to professionally dive to the site. They found over 2,900 gold coins and 45 ingots, along with other artifacts and things of interest to scientists like worms that eat wood. You never know what you're going to find. Neolithic Village. While 2020 has had some bad news, this discovery should cheer you up. In July of this year, it was announced that archaeologists have found the remains of the oldest underwater site ever found in Australia. For the first time, archaeologists have discovered a preserved Aboriginal site dating back 7,000 years. While human history in Australia dates back at least 65,000 years, many of its archaeological sites are now underwater, making them harder to find, but hopefully keeping them safe. But why did all of Australia's archaeological sites move underwater? Well, we can blame the end of the Ice Age for that one. When the Ice Age ended some 12,000 years ago, about 33% of Australia's land was flooded. Marine archaeologists from Flinders University in Adelaide have been exploring the coast of Murujuga, also known as the Dampier Archipelago, in northwestern Australia, using all kinds of modern technology, and it paid off. At first, the team used LiDAR to scan the shallow areas, and after diving at a few sites with no success, they finally came upon one that revealed several stone artifacts, and then more, and more, with the divers eventually finding 269 of them. They were about 8 feet underwater, and they were probably used by early indigenous people for things like scraping, crushing, cutting, and hammering. One of them might have even been used to crush seeds to make bread. This discovery points to the fact that there are likely still tons of discoveries waiting to be found off the coast of Australia, and the team learned that material found on the sea floor can be discovered and analyzed as accurately as archaeology on land. The Titanic. The Titanic was declared unsinkable when it was first built, and it definitely wasn't. Today, their declaration of its unsinkability stands as a tragic testament to humanity's tendency to occasionally get a little too confident. All this time, it's been sitting at the bottom of the ocean. For a number of years, no one was able to find its decaying husk, but in 1985, a team of US and French explorers put their heads together and solved the mystery of the location of the Titanic. U.S. naval officer and oceanographer Dr. Robert Ballard led the expedition using a robot fitted with a camera called the Argo. The team was beginning to lose hope until they finally spotted something. Argo sent a dim, grainy picture of a metal object, a giant boiler. After 73 years, the Titanic was found. Interestingly enough, Ballard had requested funding from the U.S. Navy for Argo. They weren't that excited about paying for searching for the Titanic, but the new robot could be used to search wrecks belonging to the Navy. They approved Ballard's request, but it was kept top secret since he was also supposed to be looking for 2 lost nuclear submarines at the same time. Thanks to Argo and another unmanned submarine, the team was able to document the wreck of the Titanic to piece together what had happened to the doomed ship. The Titanic lies 13,000 feet below the surface, where there is little light and little life. Since its discovery, it has been researched and studied with better technology, but this find remains one of the greatest discoveries of the modern era. While there may be countless personal items still in the ship, as the ship continues to decay, the race is on to recover a rumored 200 million pounds worth of diamonds. So far, only about 5% of valuable artifacts have been recovered, and while many think the ship should be left alone, the company that owns the salvage rights wants to look through the first-class luggage in the cargo hold, as well as bags where passengers may have stashed their valuables as the ship was sinking. Roman medicine. Between the 1980s and 1990s, a group of divers from the Archaeological Superintendency of Tuscany traveled off the coast of Tuscany to excavate the remains of the Relitto del Pozzino, which was a Roman ship that sank in the area at some point around 120 BC. It was quite hard to excavate carefully since it was covered in plants and the wood was pretty rotten, but they said it was worth the work because what they found was incredible. Inside of the ship, they uncovered the cargo. Most of it was ceramic vessels for wine, as well as glass cups and lamps from the Middle East and Asia. But the real shocker came in 2004, when they unearthed the remains of a medicine chest that was at least 2,000 years old. The actual container itself has long since deteriorated, but they found some surgical materials and over 130 wooden drug vials and tin containers along with other medicinal tools, all clumped together at the bottom of the ocean. When they looked closer, they also found medicine tablets or pills inside the tin. Amazingly, the tin container was sealed so no water had gotten in, even after 2,000 years. So we can actually see what Romans used as medicine. After a chemical analysis, it looks like the pills contained zinc compounds, iron oxide, starch, and various different kinds of plant material such as pine resin. Researchers believe these tablets might have been used to treat eye diseases. We can't know how well these worked, but it's very rare to find physical evidence of these things from so long ago. The Sham. In 2018, a storm disrupted the waters along the coast of Cornwall in the UK, leading to some amazing and dangerous objects being uncovered. Divers spotted artifacts in the water, which turned out to be hand grenades packed with gunpowder and cannons. Then the shipwreck was revealed. It was the Sham, a ship that had sunk off the Cornish coast in 1684. Once a pirate ship that had been stolen from the Dutch in 1683, it was recaptured by the Royal Navy and used to transport goods until it was sunk by a storm near Dollar Cove. The recent storm dislodged a number of artifacts, and 2 17th century hand grenades made from a hollow iron shell and filled with gunpowder were also found on a nearby beach after having been washed ashore from the exposed wreck. Despite being damp and hundreds of years old, this triggered a response from the bomb disposal squad, who had to investigate to ensure that local beachgoers were safe from any other objects that could have been found. Ancient mine. Just below the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, a group of divers were swimming around in an underwater cave in 2017, just exploring the area. But then, after a while, they came to a threshold. It was only a little over 2 feet wide, but it was an entrance into another world. As they peered inside, they discovered a large cave system that turned out to be an ancient mine. At first, these divers couldn't be sure what this site could have been used for, but that's where the scientists entered the picture. There were tools and hundreds of pits. Over the years, the sea levels rose, hiding the mine underwater. Experts dated some of the materials at the site to around 11,000 years ago, which means that this mine was worked by some of the earliest inhabitants of the Americas. Additionally, they were able to determine that the mine was likely used to extract red ochre pigments, which have been used for everything from art to sunscreen. These miners were in the Americas around 1,000 years before the Mayans ever declared the land their own. Archaeologists had found similar remains of these people deep inside of caves before, but they were never really sure why they decided to venture so deeply into the rocky underbelly of the Earth. But now, scientists can say that there is at least one reason that they decided to go there. They were trying to mine for this precious pigment, ochre, which has found a variety of uses throughout history and was very expensive. Nuestra Señora de Atocha. Considered the world's most valuable shipwreck, the Nuestra Señora de Atocha was loaded with tons of gold and silver taken from South America destined for Spain. In 1622, the ship, along with about 20 more, left port in Cuba when tragedy struck. A hurricane hit the fleet the following day, and 8 of the ships were destroyed, including Our Lady of Atocha. This heavily armed galleon was sailing at the rear of the formation and was carrying 24 tons of silver, 125 gold bars, 180,000 pesos of silver coins, 350 chests of indigo, emeralds, tobacco, silverware, bronze cannons, and much, much more. For 60 years, the Spanish searched to recover the lost ship, but no luck. Hundreds of years later, treasure hunter and diver Mel Fisher searched for it for 16 years. During that time, clues started appearing: silver bars marked with a special symbol, cannons, and the wreck of a sister ship. And then he found it. Since discovering the wreck in 1985, Fisher's company has recovered more than $500 million worth of treasure, along with numerous historically important artifacts. Perhaps most interesting of all, though, is that there is still more of the ship yet to be found, including the stern castle, where the captain's cabin would have been, a place that's keenly sought after on all shipwrecks because it's where the most valuable of all treasures were kept. Thanks for watching! What do you think is the coolest underwater discovery? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!